Hello. Wanted to make another video. It's kind of a stormy day here in central Illinois, but I think all the rough stuff has missed us. That's good. I might hear an occasional clap of thunder or something. That'd be very dramatic. But I want to talk a little bit about the Testament of Mary, but of course through the lens of the master, William Gass. Um, Several of you mentioned in your posts about how the just the sound of the language was so engaging. Haunting was a word that came up, I think, more than once. That's a word that I used when I initially described the book when I first read it. Um, and so, what I want to do is read a little bit from the Testament of Mary, and then I want to talk a little bit about the Master, and then I want to go back to the Testament of Mary, and yeah, that's what I want to do. So I'm going to do. I'm just going to read the first three paragraphs because, quite honestly, when I kind of had an idea for what I want to do for this video, I thought, I might have to poke around in the text a little bit. But lo and behold, nah, just from the very beginning, um, Toibin's doing what he does throughout the book. So again, this is just the first three paragraphs. They appear more often now, both of them, and on every visit they seem more impatient with me and with the world. There is something hungry and rough in them, a brutality boiling in their blood, which I have seen before and I can smell as an animal that is being hunted can smell. But I am not being hunted now, not any more. I am being cared for and questioned softly and watched. They think that I do not know the elaborate nature of their desires, but nothing escapes me now except sleep. Sleep escapes me. Maybe I am too old to sleep, or there is nothing further to be gained from sleep. Maybe I do not need to dream or need to rest. Maybe my eyes know that soon they will be closed forever. I will stay awake if I have to. I will come down these stairs as the dawn breaks, as the dawn insinuates its rays of light into this room. I have my own reasons to watch and wait. Before the final rest comes this long awakening, and it is enough for me to know that it will end. They think I do not understand what is slowly growing in the world. They think I do not see the point of their questions and do not notice the cruel shadow of exasperation that comes hooded in their faces or hidden in their voices when I say something vague or foolish, something which leads us nowhere. When I seem not to remember what they think I must remember, they are too locked into their vast and insatiable needs and too dulled by the remnants of a terror we all felt than to have noticed that I remember everything. Memory fills my body as much as blood and bones. One more paragraph. I like it that they feed me and pay for my clothes and protect me, and in return I will do for them what I can, but no more than that. Just as I cannot breathe and just as I cannot breathe the breath of another or help the heart of someone else to beat, or their bones not to weaken, or their flesh not to shrivel, I cannot say more than I can say. And I know how deeply this disturbs them, and it would make me smile, this earnest need for foolish anecdotes or sharp, simple patterns in the story of what happened to us all, except that I have forgotten not to smile. I have no further need for smiling, just as I had no further need for tears. There was a time when I thought that I had, in fact, no tears left, that I had used up my store of tears. But I am lucky that foolish thoughts like this never linger, are quickly replaced by what is true. There are always tears if you need them enough. It is the body that makes tears. I no longer need tears, and that should be a relief. But I do not seek relief, merely solitude and some grim satisfaction which comes from the certainty that I will not say anything that is not true. All right, so that's the opening of the Testament of Mary. So one of the things that I got from Gass when I discovered him in 2009 or so. I was in my 40s, and I don't think I ever heard of him, which is amazing since, he was a St. Louis guy. I lived just a couple of hours from St. Louis, but I had never encountered him, or at least I didn't think that I had. But I found him in 2009, and his attention to language is what really caught my attention and appealed to me and has really changed me as a writer. Obviously, I've not found fame and fortune, but I have found a great deal more sort of artistic satisfaction in my own work after having found Gass and sort of learning from him through his writing and through his essays and through his interviews, etc. Um, so there's a couple of things I want to focus on, and then, like I said, go back to the Testament of Mary. So one of the things that comes to mind when we think about William Gass, if you're familiar with him at all or become familiar with him, is that he had this long running debate, and maybe I've mentioned this in class before, but this long running debate with his friend John Gardner, who obviously wrote Grendel. And, it was a friendly debate. They were friends, literally. Gass would come and hang out at Gardner's farm and they'd drink together and have a good time together and all that stuff. But they were pretty fiery when it came to their different views of fiction and what its purpose in the world ought to be, and so on. And in a nutshell, Gardner believed that one should write fiction, one should write a novel or a short story to teach a kind of moral lesson. And Gass wasn't into that. He thought that one should write a short story or a novella or a novel for the purpose of adding to the world a beautiful short story or a beautiful novella or a beautiful novel, not to have any particular moral purpose. He didn't believe that art had a moral function. It had merely an artistic, function. And I just wanted to read one particular um, paragraph from the conversations with William Gass that is an excerpt from his debate, one of his debates with John Gardner. And the interviewer, Thomas LeClaire, asks, does this kind of purity of creation have a moral value in the world as well as an aesthetic one? In other words, can it be both? Can fiction be both moral and artistic? And Gass says, sure, John wants a message, some kind of communication to the world. I want to plant some object in the world. Now, it happens to be made of signs, which may lead people to think, because it's made of signs, that it's pointing somewhere. But actually, I've gone down the road and collected all the sorts of highway signs, made a piece of sculpture out of these things that says Chicago 35,000 miles. What I hope, of course, is that people will come along, gather in front of the sculpture, and take a look at it, consequently forgetting Chicago. I want to add something to the world which the world can then ponder the same way it ponders the world. Now, what kind of object? Old romantic that I am, I would like to add objects to the world worthy of love. I think that the things one loves, must most particularly in other people, are quite beyond anything they communicate or merely mean, quote unquote. Planting those objects is a moral activity, I suppose. You certainly don't want to add objects to the world that everybody will detest. Ugh, another slug made by Bill Gass. That's likely to be their attitude, but you don't hope for it. The next question is, why is it that one wants this thing loved? My particular aim is to be loved because it is so beautiful in itself, something that exists simply to be experienced. The beauty has to come first. Let me repeat that very final thing. The beauty has to come first. I was supposed to go to Italy last summer and present a paper on Gass's aesthetics at a conference on the short story in English. And that I actually took the title of my proposed paper from that line there. The beauty must come first. Now, unfortunately, because of the pandemic, that conference was postponed. It was postponed till 2022, this coming year, and it's moved to Singapore. And I tentatively agreed to go to Singapore to give the paper on Gass's aesthetics. But I don't know. I don't know if things are looking much better now for that possibility than they were a year ago, but we'll see. But anyway, Gass wanted to create stories and novels and essays and book reviews and translated poems and the like, as beautiful works of literary art to be loved just for their own sake, not because they had a particularly important moral message, not because they were page turners, etc., but because they used language beautifully. And as a result of that, he even though he wrote almost exclusively prose, like I say, he did do some poetic translations, particularly of Rilke. But even though he was a prose writer, he very much believed that prose writers should be as interested in language as poets are, and they should be using the same skill sets. They should be using alliteration and assonance and repetition and rhyme and meter, etc., to construct their sentences and their paragraphs and their chapters and etc. Just as poets think about those things to construct their lines and stanzas and so on. And in fact, in an interview in 1984, Gass said that he believed the best poets working at that time were, in fact, fiction writers. He says, when you compare what is going on in poetry from the point of view of poetry in the larger traditional sense, all the really fine poets now are writing fiction. I would stack up paragraphs of Hawkes, that's John Hawkes, Robert Coover, Stanley Elkin, or William Gaddis against the better poets writing now. Just from the power of the poetic impulse itself, the poets, quote unquote, wouldn't stand a chance. Now, it would have been unseemly for Gass to have added his name to that list of the great poets writing fiction now, but that certainly was the group of writers that he was always associated with by other people. He would be thrown into that mix when talking about Hawkes and Coover and Elkin and Gaddis and so on. Barth would also be thrown in there. He didn't put his name in there, but that would be another writer that would be part of that group that was always kind of talked about in the same breath. Right. So the use of poetics, alliteration, assonance, and so forth. Unfortunately, I lost my other little sticky. But he was asked about that in an earlier interview, and talked about how important that was to him to work on the wording, the diction, the syntax, the meter, the rhythm, the rhyme, etc. And I've mentioned in my previous video, and I'm sure I've written about it, the fact that if you go to the Gass archive at WashU and get out his early drafts, his first and third and 15th and 30th drafts of whatever he was working on, in the margins, he's working through all of that stuff, the stressed and unstressed words and the sentences and the rhythm of the paragraph and so forth and so on. So I would contend that those of you who picked up on the haunting aspect of the Testament of Mary and Colm Toibin's prose and so forth, what you're picking up on is Toibin using poetic tools for his prose, alliteration, assonance, which, as you know, is the repetition of vowel sounds from word to word or within the same line or so at least, pauses, repetitions. Again, all of those things we tend to associate with poetry. So I want to read through those 3 paragraphs again, but now listen for poetic devices. Again, alliteration, assonance, repetition, rhythm, etc. And so listen to this as if it's a poem and not the first 3 paragraphs of a novel. Here I go. They appear more often now, both of them, and on every visit they seem more impatient with me and with the world. There is something hungry and rough in them, a brutality boiling in their blood, which I have seen before, and I can smell as an animal that is being hunted can smell. But I am not being hunted now, not any more. I am being cared for and questioned softly and watched. They think that I do not know the elaborate nature of their desires, but nothing escapes me now except sleep. Sleep escapes me. Maybe I am too old to sleep, or there is nothing further to be gained from sleep. Maybe I do not need to dream or need to rest. Maybe my eyes know that soon they will be closed forever. I will stay awake if I have to. I will come down these stairs as the dawn breaks, as the dawn insinuates its rays of light into this room. I have my own reasons to watch and wait before the final rest comes, this long awakening, and it is enough for me to know that it will end. They think I do not understand what is slowly growing in the world. They think I do not see the point of their questions and do not notice the cruel shadow of exasperation that comes hooded in their faces or hidden in their voices when I say something vague or foolish, something which leads us nowhere. When I seem not to remember what they think I must remember, they are too locked into their vast and insatiable needs and too dulled by the remnants of a terror we all felt than to have noticed that I remember everything. Memory fills my body as much as blood and bones. I like it that they feed me and pay for my clothes and protect me, and in return I will do for them what I can, but no more than that. Just as I cannot breathe the breath of another, or help the heart of someone else to beat, or their bones not to weaken, or their flesh not to shrivel, I cannot say more than I can say. And I know how deeply this disturbs them, and it would make me smile, this earnest need for foolish anecdotes or sharp, simple patterns in the story of what happened to us all, except that I have forgotten how to smile. I have no further need for smiling, just as I had no further need for tears. There was a time when I thought that I had, in fact, no tears left, that I had used up my store of tears, but I am lucky that foolish thoughts like this never linger, are quickly replaced by what is true. There are always tears if you need them enough. It is the body that makes tears. I no longer need tears, and that should be a relief. But I do not seek relief, merely solitude and some grim satisfaction which comes from the certainty that I will not say anything that is not true. Okay, so I think, that time particularly, maybe the time before too, you picked up on just the copious amount of alliteration, the internal rhyming, the repetition, the pauses for rhetorical effect or aesthetic effect, however you want to say it. And I think that's what makes the Testament of Mary stand apart from so many other books. I think that's what makes it so arresting. That I mean, the story, yeah, obviously is pretty sensational. As this, this view of Mary that is so different from the traditional biblical, version of Mary that we've all been exposed to, whether Christian or not, because we've grown up in a Christian culture. But So yeah, there's that. But still, I don't think the book would be so memorable if it weren't for the sort of penetrating force of Toybin's language. And Gass talks about how that's what makes a story linger. There aren't that many plots in the world, quite frankly. I'm sure you all studied the basic, conflicts. They're sexist now, but when a lot of us were in school, it was man versus man versus nature, man versus himself, so forth and so on. Obviously, we could make that more universal in terms of the pronouns, but nevertheless, there's a limited number of conflicts that writers can write about. So why will one story be haunting, and why will we find ourselves thinking about it while we're walking the dog, or wake up and realize we've been sort of dreaming about it or half dozing thinking about the story? It's not probably because of the original plot, because there is no such thing. It's not because of the incredibly unique characters, because I don't know, there's not that many unique characters. But what will make it penetrating into our subconscious and make us remember it is the language. And you can bet that Toybin, yeah, I mean, if you're of a mind, you can be writing like that I use a lot of that poetic stuff in my prose, and sometimes I'm kind of in the zone as I'm doing that first draft, and my mind's kind of thinking in those sort of poetic ways. But quite honestly, much of the time I'm not. I'm just kind of getting the word down on the page, and I'm kind of thinking about, okay, who's this character and where are they going and why are they doing it? Um, and then later, after sort of the basics of the story are kind of starting to come together, as I'm going back and revising, one of the chief things I'm revising for is just to improve the quality of the language, to make choices to get that alliteration, that assonance, that repetition, that rhyming, that rhythm in there that was lacking the first time around. Is it a wholly different story in terms of plot, in terms of characterization? Nah, but is it a wholly better story because of the better quality of the language? I think so. At least it's better for me. I've enjoyed writing it more. I'm prouder of it. I'm much more satisfied with it as a work of literary art of some sort. Again, it's not the sort of thing you find in a James Patterson novel. I don't think J.K. Rowling was particularly concerned about that sort of thing when she was writing the Harry Potter series. And you can go on and list all the top, uh, authors out there, and probably most of them, or maybe none of them, are that super concerned with language and how the thing sounds when you read it aloud or whatever, and that's okay. And if you want to be on the bestseller list, you maybe want to avoid a lot of alliteration and assonance, those kinds of things. But the thing that I've said about the discovery of gas for my own work is um, that gas taught me not to be afraid of language. I was born in 62. I graduated from high school in 1980. My teachers were all gaga over Ernest Hemingway. So I got Hemingway coming out the ears when I was adolescent, then in my undergrad years and so forth. And of course, Hemingway was sort of the antithesis of what Gass is talking about. Hemingway, used this very abbreviated staccato kind of a style, short sentences, kind of like a boxer jabbing you, with his fist or something. And that's not, what Gas is talking about. So anyway, that was sort of the literary milieu that I grew up in. So when I was starting to get serious about writing, really ever since I was a kid, but certainly, when I went to college and started thinking about becoming a writer of fiction and publishing my fiction and so forth, I was trying to write like Hemingway, sometimes deliberately but probably always unconsciously. But then I had the revelation when I discovered Gas, and like I said, around 2009 or so, and showed me that you don't have to be afraid of doing all the stuff that poets do when you're a fiction writer. You can use all those same tools and have the same kind of fun with language that poets have always had, etc. And so I see clearly in my work, my sort of pre-gas, post-gas work, and for my money at least, the stuff I've been writing since then has just been head and shoulders better than anything I wrote before, and it's all because of the master. And again, sort of teaching me to not be afraid to use the tools that I've got, to write a story using all of that poetic stuff. All right, so I will stop there. I'm sure I've given you plenty to think about. Certainly feel free to post comments in the announcements section. I think this will be my final video for this course. So I'll just also add that I've really enjoyed working with you these last, 8 weeks or so. You've done just incredible work and have shown great aptitude and facility for dealing with the material, and have pointed out all kinds of interesting things. I certainly have learned a lot of things from you thanks to all of your efforts, and so hopefully you've learned a couple of things from me as well, and hopefully I'll see some of you down the road.